All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last video of this chapter. And I just kind of want to recover a couple of very important things. The difference between demand and quantity demanded. Remember that quantity demanded is a point. It is changed by the price in the good, or it is changed by a change in the price of the good. And it is a movement along the line. So if you remember, quantity is a point where right now we have a series of prices. And then quantity demanded 1, QD1, is our first line. So the price and quantity being demanded, that is that relationship. These two columns together, the whole column is demand. But if we look at, well, how much is being demanded, what is a quantity being demanded at a price of 3, we could say it's 8. We could say quantity demanded is 8 at a price of 3. It is one row on that particular table. We could say that the column between price and QD2, those both are a relationship. It shows a relationship all the way down between price and quantity. That was a horrible circle. But we could also say that at QD2 on that second quantity demanded line, or that second demand line, that at a price of 4 they demand 12 units, or 12 units is the quantity that is being demanded at a price of 4. So quantity demanded is a point along that line. Quantity demanded is only changed by a change in the price. If prices increase from 2 to 3, we see quantity demand falls from 8 to 9. Over here, if prices increase 6 to 7, we see quantity demanded right here falls from 10 to 9. So if prices fall, we see that the quantity demanded will increase on a demand curve. That a decrease in price as we move, and there is a movement along the demand curve, and that's a movement down the demand curve, we see quantity increases. Whereas if prices increase, like it does right here, we see that quantity being demanded falls. And it goes from this point and moves along the demand curve to this point. So a couple of key things to remember is that quantity demanded is a point. It is a row on this line. And the only time you can change quantity demanded is by changing the price. And if you change the price, it causes a movement along the line. Now demand. Demand is a relationship between price and quantity. It's a relationship between this column and this column. It's a relationship between this column and this column. It is a relationship between price and quantity. And you can't say that demand is a single specific point. It's a relationship between two columns. And it's the full column is that demand relationship. If we wanted to move or shift that demand and we go from quantity demanded 1 to quantity demanded 2, that would be a change in the Ceteris Paribus conditions. We would change that Ceteris Paribus condition somehow, and we would have a shift in the line. We see right down here that as we increase from, or we actually have an outward shift in this demand curve. We go from D1 to D2. And what happens here, we always know it's a demand curve, is if we keep prices the same and the quantity demanded changes. So let's look at this one for example. We have a shift in the demand curve. It is shifted outward, and we keep the constant price level. But what has happened to quantity? Quantity has increased, even though prices never changed. That indicates that it was a shift in the demand curve. And anytime that quantity increases, but prices don't stay the same, we have an outward or a rightward shift in the demand curve. The opposite happens if we have an inward shift. If we have an inward shift in the demand curve where we go from D1 to D2, and it's a leftward shift and an inward shift, and we keep prices the same, but we see quantity actually fall. That is an inward shift, a leftward shift in that demand curve. So let's look back up here, and we look at this level of quantity demanded versus this one, this demand relationship versus this one. If we keep prices the same at $5, under QD or under demand 1, we consumed 6 units. But now under demand 2, the second demand line, we consume 11 units. Prices never changed, but now we consume more. Quantity demanded is increased even though prices never stayed the same. That would indicate an outward shift in demand curve. Now, as we went through the chapter, we said that the demand curves shifters would be the price of another good, say a substitute or a complement, the price or the income. We said that, or we lumped everything else into taste and preferences. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the different shifters of demand. And I'm going to call these the original shifters of demand. If you were to go back and look through older textbooks and other ag econ and other just econ textbooks, and you were to look it up online, you're probably going to see where they talk about the 6 shifters of demand being the price of a substitute good, price of a complementary good, consumer's income, taste and preferences, expectations, and demographics. So we've already talked about all of these with the exception of expectations. That's the only one that we really haven't hit on. But if you were to look in an older textbook, these are the 6 different shifters of demand that we are used to seeing. So the demographics would be that composition of population that we talked about earlier. The tastes and preferences, that is just tastes and preferences. That's lifestyle. That's attitude towards health and nutrition. That was attitude towards food safety. That's all wrapped up in tastes and preferences. We know that price of a substitute good, what that's going to do. Price of a complementary good. We know what consumer income is going to do, whether it's a normal good or an inferior good. But expectations tend to have an impact as well. So, for example, let's say that you're expecting a hurricane to hit along the Gulf of Mexico, or you're expecting a major blizzard in North and South Dakota, or you're expecting some kind of adverse weather. You might want to go ahead and go stockpile or go stock up on goods and buy enough goods to be able to last through that natural disaster. Prices never changed, but the amount that you're consuming has. Your taste and preference haven't changed. The demographics haven't changed. Your income hasn't changed. The prices haven't changed, but you expect that you're going to need to stay at home. So you go and stockpile and you demand more at that particular present point in time. Now, another thing that I want you to be aware of is that whether we're dealing with any of these 6 shifters, prices of a good, income, taste and preferences, expectations, consumer demographics, whether we're dealing with any of these 6 shifters of demand, we're only going to shift the demand curve outward or inward. That's the only 2 ways. So we're either going to, depending on what the scenario is, it's either going to be an outward shift in demand or an inward shift in demand. And it doesn't matter which example I use. We could say the population of 65 years and older is growing. So what does that do to the demand for medical? Well, it increases that demand for medical. The price of a substitute good falls. So what is that going to do to the demand of the original good? Well, it's going to make it fall. Price of a complementary good rises. What is that going to do to demand? Well, it's going to make it fall. And we can go through each one of these, and it's going to be one or the other. So just to recap, quantity demanded is a point. It is a row on this table, whereas demand is the table itself. You only change quantity demanded by changing the price of the good. And it's either going to increase the price or decrease the price. And if price falls, quantity demanded goes up. Price increases, quantity demanded goes down. And it causes a movement along the line. Demand is a relationship, and it's only changed by a change in the ceteris paribus conditions. These 6 shifters of demand are known as the ceteris paribus conditions. It will shift the line, and it's either going to shift it inwards or outwards. The old standard was talking about 6 different shifters of demand. We talked about them throughout the lesson. We're just giving them a different name now. Price of substitute good, price of a complementary good, consumer's income, tastes and preferences, expectations, and demographics.